close your eyes and let your breathing slow. Tonight, we travel back to the dawn of civilization, to a time when gods walked among men and the stars whispered secrets to the earth. Before Egypt, before Babylon, there were the Anunnaki, the ancient beings said to have descended from the heavens, shaping humanity in their image and teaching the first people how to build, to write, to dream. As you listen, allow the gentle rhythm of history to carry you through the sands of time, where myth and memory blur like moonlight on water. Feel the stillness settle in your chest, the comfort of the night surrounding you. You are safe here, drifting through the forgotten ages. So find your place, let your thoughts fade, and if you enjoy journeys like this one, remember to like, subscribe, and share so others may drift with you into the mysteries of the ancient world. Now, let's close our eyes and begin the story of the Anunnaki. Under the endless starlit sky of ancient Mesopotamia, the air was thick with warmth and mystery. The rivers shimmered under the moonlight, the great Tigris and Euphrates winding like silver veins through the sleeping earth. Along their fertile banks, the first fires of civilization flickered faintly, tended by men and women who still half remembered a time before memory, when gods walked beside them and taught them how to live. The elders would whisper stories in the quiet of the night, stories that made even the bravest hearts slow their breath. They spoke of beings from beyond the sky, beings of immense wisdom and power, the Anunnaki. It was said they came from a shining planet that crossed near the earth in great cycles, descending in blazing chariots that lit the heavens. When they arrived, the mountains trembled, and the waters of the great rivers rose in reverence. They were not human, and yet they looked like us, taller, radiant, their eyes bright like the dawn star. Long ago, before cities and kings, before writing and stone temples, the earth was wild and unshaped. The Anunnaki found it rich but untamed, and they saw in humanity a spark waiting to be kindled. The first humans were said to live in scattered tribes, hunting under the sun and hiding from the storms at night. But the Anunnaki watched them with curiosity, speaking among themselves in voices that rolled like thunder across the sky. They wondered if these fragile beings could be molded into something greater, something that could bear the burden of labor and yet reflect divine wisdom. In the deep heart of the earth, near the place we would later call Sumer, they built their first city, Eridu. It was said to be a jewel of stone and gold, rising above the marshes like a promise. From its temples, columns of smoke reached toward the heavens. The leader of the Anunnaki on earth was Enki, the lord of water and wisdom. He loved the earth deeply, loved its rivers and its creatures, and saw potential in humankind. His brother Enlil, ruler of the air and storms, was less patient. He believed the humans were noisy, weak, and forgetful, unworthy of the gifts of the gods. And yet the decision was made. The Anunnaki would teach. They began with the simplest of lessons: how to shape clay, how to plant seed, how to follow the turning of the stars to mark the passing of seasons. Humanity listened, wide-eyed and trembling, to voices that seemed to hum through their very bones. Slowly, the tribes became farmers and builders, and the first villages appeared beside the rivers. They called themselves the children of Anu, the great father of the heavens. Each night, they would look to the dark sky where countless stars shimmered like a jeweled tapestry. They believed those lights were the cities of the Anunnaki, shining far away in the realm of the gods. The people built temples of mud and reed, then of brick and stone, each one taller than the last, each one meant to reach a little closer to the stars. The Anunnaki watched with pride as the humans grew more skilled, but they also saw the cost. Their creations were hungry, their cities demanded endless work, and the humans began to pray for relief from their toil. Enki listened. He walked among them in disguise, a traveler wrapped in the dust of the world, teaching by word and by example. He whispered secrets of healing, the use of herbs, the drawing of symbols that could call upon unseen forces. To the women, he gave the knowledge of childbirth. To the men, the strength to shape tools of bronze and copper. It is said that in those early days, the line between mortal and divine was thin as mist at dawn. But not all of the Anunnaki were pleased with Enki's compassion. Enlil, his stern brother, believed that humanity should serve, not question. He ordered the building of great ziggurats, mountain temples that reached toward the realm of the gods, and demanded offerings from the people. Smoke rose day and night as the humans labored, lifting bricks with blistered hands, believing their suffering would bring favor from the heavens. The sound of hammers and chants echoed through the valleys, and still the Anunnaki watched. As the centuries passed, humanity grew in number and strength. The cities of Sumer, Ur, Nippur, Lagash, each claimed to be the place where the gods had first descended. Kings ruled in the name of the Anunnaki, wearing crowns shaped like the horns of bulls, the sacred symbol of power. The priests wrote in careful lines upon clay tablets, recording the words of the gods, the cycles of the moon, and the names of those who ruled. But beneath this new order, something deeper stirred. Humans began to dream of freedom, of living without divine command. Some whispered that the gods were not gods at all, but travelers from the stars who had used humanity to build their cities and mines. Others said the Anunnaki had grown weary of their own kind, divided by pride and jealousy. Stories spread of wars among the heavens, of great storms that were not storms but battles waged with fire from the sky. One night, under a sky filled with lightning, Enlil summoned the council of the gods. The humans had multiplied too much, he declared. Their noise disturbed his rest. Their endless growth would soon overrun the world. He proposed to cleanse the earth with a mighty flood, a storm so great that only silence would remain. Many of the Anunnaki agreed, for they feared the humans had forgotten gratitude. But Enki, who had watched the humans learn to write and sing and love, could not bear it. In secret, he chose one man, Atrahasis, and spoke to him in a dream. "Build a vessel," Enki whispered. "Take your family, your animals, the seeds of every living thing. A great flood is coming, but you must live." Atrahasis obeyed, guided by the divine voice. He worked in silence, building a ship of pitch and wood upon the riverbank while others mocked him. And when the sky split open and the rains began, the earth trembled as if the gods themselves wept. For 7 days and 7 nights, the waters rose, swallowing cities, temples, and fields. The Anunnaki watched from the heavens, their hearts heavy with what they had done. Enlil saw the devastation and grew silent. Enki's tears fell with the rain. When the waters at last receded, Atrahasis and his kin stepped onto the soft earth, the air filled with the scent of renewal. The Anunnaki descended once more, looking upon the world they had nearly destroyed. Enlil relented, promising that never again would such a flood consume mankind. The humans offered thanks, and the gods taught them anew how to rebuild. Thus began the second age of the earth, an age of kings and temples and stories carved into stone. But something had changed. The Anunnaki no longer walked among humans as they once had. They appeared only in dreams, in visions, in the flicker of oil lamps in temple corners. Some said they had returned to the stars, to their home beyond the heavens. Others believed they had simply retreated beneath the earth, to the hidden places where the old power still lingered. Yet their presence remained in every city, in every ritual, in every story told beside a sleeping fire. As the years rolled into centuries, the memory of the Anunnaki faded into myth. The children of Sumer became the people of Akkad, then of Babylon and Assyria. Empires rose and fell like waves on the river, but the old stories endured. Even when new gods took the thrones of heaven, the names of Enki and Enlil, of Inanna and Ninhursag, whispered on the wind. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces between dreams, the Anunnaki watched still. Some believed they would return when the stars once again aligned, when the great planet of their origin came near the Earth. Others said they had never truly left, that their essence lived on in the blood of kings, in the wisdom of scribes, in the fire of human ambition. And so, night after night, the people would gaze upward, searching the sky for a sign, a streak of light, a distant glimmer, the echo of divine footsteps. In the stillness of the desert night, the wind carried whispers over the dunes. The stories told by the ancients lingered in the air, soft and eternal, like the hum of the cosmos itself. And if you listen closely, with your heart quiet and your breath slow, you might still hear them, the voices of the Anunnaki, murmuring across the ages, guiding humanity through the long, drowsy dream of history. Now, as the stars shimmer gently above the cradle of civilization, let your mind drift through that distant land, through temples lost to time and rivers that no longer flow. Feel the weight of forgotten ages settle softly upon you. The Anunnaki are gone, but their story remains, carved into the soul of humankind like an ancient lullaby, waiting to be remembered in the silence before sleep. In the soft glow of the ancient dawn, the mists rose from the rivers, curling like white breath against the bronze sky. The first people of Sumer stirred from their reed huts, the scent of clay and wet earth heavy around them. They looked to the east where the horizon burned with pale fire and whispered prayers to the gods who had taught them how to till the land. Though many seasons had passed since the great flood, the memory of it still lived in their stories. They said the gods had once drowned the world and then taken pity, giving humanity a second chance. Every sound of thunder, every flash of lightning, still reminded them of divine anger. And yet they also remembered mercy, for Enki had saved them. So they built temples in his honor, pouring water upon the altars to cool his spirit and thank him for his gifts. Among these people, the priests were keepers of the oldest words. They rose before sunrise, their feet bare upon the temple stones, chanting hymns that spoke of the Anunnaki. They called upon Enki, Enlil, Inanna, Ninhursag, and others whose names were ancient even then. The chants carried softly across the city of Eridu, mingling with the cries of waking birds and the trickle of the river. The people believed the gods still walked unseen among them, shaping their destinies, whispering through the rush of the wind. In the stillness of morning, an old scribe sat before a tablet of wet clay. With careful hands he pressed a stylus into its surface, forming wedge-shaped lines that would outlast empires. He wrote of the beginning as it had been told to him by the elders. In the time before time, the story began, the gods descended from the heavens to make the earth their domain. They were called Anunnaki, the mighty offspring of Anu, lord of the sky, and Ki, the earth herself. Together, they shaped the world from chaos. Each stroke of the stylus was a prayer, each symbol a bridge to the divine. The scribe's eyes were old, but his heart was full of awe. He believed the gods had chosen humankind to remember for them, to keep the echo of their presence alive. Far beyond the walls of the city, the land stretched into golden plains and dark mountains. There were whispers that the Anunnaki still lingered there, in hidden palaces, beneath sacred hills, or within the clouds that crowned distant peaks. Shepherds told stories of strange lights moving silently across the night sky. Some said they were stars, others swore they were the chariots of the gods, returning to watch over their creation. The priests taught that the Anunnaki were divided between those who loved humanity and those who saw mankind only as servants. Enki, ever compassionate, had given humans the gift of wisdom, of curiosity, of imagination. Enlil, stern and commanding, ruled the laws of heaven and earth. Between them lay a tension older than the rivers themselves, a cosmic balance of creation and control. The humans who served both gods learned that life was not meant to be easy, but sacred. Every hardship, every harvest, Every flood and drought carried meaning. In those early centuries, knowledge spread like dawn light. The Sumerians built canals that sparkled in the sun, guided by Enki's teachings of water. They raised ziggurats that pierced the clouds, their stairways believed to lead directly to the stars. From these towers, they watched the heavens, mapping the movements of planets and constellations. The priests said these were not mere lights but signs, the writing of the Anunnaki themselves. Through the stars, the gods spoke, and through careful observation, humans could learn their will. Night after night, the people gathered by the temple fires to hear the tales of the old gods. The storytellers spoke of how the Anunnaki shaped the first humans from clay mixed with divine essence, forming beings who could think, speak, and love. They said the gods breathed life into these forms, giving each one a spark from the stars. Humanity became the child of both heaven and earth, bound by body to the soil but by spirit to the cosmos. Yet, with wisdom came desire. The humans began to ask questions their creators had not intended. Why must they labor endlessly? Why must they offer endless gifts to the gods? Some whispered that the gods were not as eternal as they claimed, that they too aged, hungered, and even quarreled among themselves. Enlil's priests silenced such talk, but in the shadows of Eridu, among the workers and fishermen, doubt began to bloom like a dark flower. One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, painting the sky in copper and violet, a young woman named Ninsa watched from the riverbank. She was a potter's daughter, known for her keen eyes and quiet spirit. That night she saw something strange, a light descending from the stars, slow and silent, glowing like molten gold. It hovered above the marshes, then vanished into the reeds. Her heart pounded. She told no one, but returned each night to the same spot, hoping to see it again. On the third night she did. From the reeds emerged a tall figure, clothed in silver robes that shimmered even in darkness. His voice, when he spoke, was soft yet heavy, like wind moving through ancient caverns. "Do not fear," he said. "I am a servant of Enki. I come to watch over those who remember." He taught her symbols she had never seen, patterns that glowed faintly in the sand. He told her of balance, of the need to keep the world in harmony between heaven and earth. Before he disappeared into the night, he touched her brow and whispered, "When the stars align again, the gods will return. Keep the old stories alive." Years later, when Ninsa was an old woman, she told her children and grandchildren of that meeting. They called her words a vision, but her story spread through the villages like a forgotten song revived. Soon, people across Sumer began to speak once more of the Anunnaki, not as distant deities, but as watchers waiting to return. The kings took notice. In Uruk, a young ruler named Gilgamesh, two-thirds divine, they said, built walls of stone so high they touched the clouds. He sought the knowledge of the gods, the secret of eternal life. He traveled deserts and mountains, rivers and seas, seeking Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood. From him, Gilgamesh learned that the gods had given mankind mortality so they might cherish every breath. Yet he also learned that hidden among the heavens was a place where the Anunnaki still dwelled, and that one day they might descend again to walk among men. As the centuries passed, the boundary between history and legend blurred. The temples grew grander, but the faith grew quieter, slipping into rituals more symbolic than real. The Anunnaki became names carved into tablets, their true nature fading from memory. Still, their influence remained, in every city that followed the stars, in every king who claimed divine right, in every dream of reaching the heavens. Sometimes, on nights when the desert winds were still and the moon shone full, the people swore they heard low hums rising from the ziggurats, like voices speaking from beyond the sky. The priests said it was the breath of the gods, the vibration of creation itself. And in their hearts, the people still believed. So the story continued, whispered through generations. Humanity, born of the earth but touched by the stars, carried forward the legacy of their makers. The Anunnaki, whether gods or wanderers from the far reaches of the cosmos, had left their mark on human destiny. Their symbols lay etched into clay, their myths woven into every civilization that followed. And as the night deepened over the sleeping plains of Sumer, the stars seemed to shimmer a little brighter, as though remembering the time when they were home to gods who loved and feared, created and destroyed, and finally vanished into the silence of eternity. Now, as the soft night air settles around you, imagine those ancient cities breathing again, the sound of water flowing through canals, the rustle of palm leaves in the breeze, the low chant of priests calling to the stars. Let the story wrap around you like the warm winds of the Mesopotamian night. The Anunnaki are gone, but their dream remains, guiding humanity still, one quiet heartbeat at a time. The night sky over ancient Sumer shimmered like a sea of molten gold. The stars hung low, bright enough to glint off the slow waters of the Euphrates, where fishermen drifted in silence and priests watched for omens reflected in the waves. The air was thick with the scent of incense from temple fires, rising in lazy spirals toward the heavens. Beneath that sky, the cities of men thrived, their walls tall, their temples gleaming under the moon. Humanity had grown strong, and yet a quiet unease had begun to ripple through the hearts of the gods who watched them. In the grand temple of Nippur, where Enlil's priests tended to the holy flame, strange murmurs passed from one to another. The omens had turned dark. The stars no longer followed their usual paths, and the winds carried whispers of discord. Some believed that Enlil was displeased, that mankind, once humble and obedient, had become too bold. The offerings of grain and wine no longer felt like devotion, but habit. In every city, men spoke of their own power, of their kings and their achievements. The old reverence was fading, and high above the Anunnaki watched. In the heavens beyond the sight of mortals, their gathering was silent but tense. Enlil's voice was heavy with anger. "They have forgotten us," he said, his tone echoing like thunder over distant mountains. "They build monuments to themselves and call it glory. They speak of their own greatness and not of ours. This cannot continue." But Enki, the wise, the keeper of knowledge and water, spoke gently. "They are our creation, brother. They have grown as we wished. We gave them curiosity, and now they question even us. Should we be angered that they used the gifts we bestowed?" "Curiosity," Enlil replied, "is the seed of rebellion. You would see them as equals, but I see the danger. If they forget their place, they will one day seek to take ours." Their debate lasted through the passing of many moons. Inanna, goddess of love and war, stood between them, her eyes flashing like the stars. "They are children," she said. "Let them live, let them love, let them fail. From their struggle comes the song of creation." But the council could not agree. The Anunnaki, once united in purpose, began to divide. Some believed the time of humans should end, others wished to guide them still. And as their quarrel deepened, strange storms began to rise upon the earth, great winds that tore across the plains, and rivers that turned violent with flood. The people trembled and prayed, believing the gods were at war. In Eridu, the oldest city, Enki walked among his temples. The sound of water echoed softly through the stone halls as he gazed into a great basin, its surface shimmering like liquid crystal. Within it he saw visions, humans working in fields, children playing, lovers whispering beneath the moon. He saw their small joys and quiet fears, their laughter and their tears. And he knew that the Anunnaki had made something sacred, something beyond control. One night, a dream came to him. The dream showed a man standing at the edge of the sea, holding a torch that never burned out. Around him, the stars fell like rain, and from their ashes rose a new city, more beautiful than any before. A voice whispered through the dream, soft, ancient, and without name. The children must awaken, not perish. The cycle must continue. When Enki woke, he understood. The fate of the world lay not in destruction, but in transformation. So he went to the temples and spoke through his priests. The gods are not gone, they proclaimed to the people. But you must remember balance. Honor the heavens, cherish the earth, and guard the knowledge given to you. For the time will come when the gods will return, and those who remember the old ways shall rise with them. The people listened, and hope stirred once more. They built shrines to Enki beside the rivers, pouring water into the soil as offerings. And though Enlil's anger still darkened the skies, the storm began to ease. Yet the tension among the Anunnaki did not fade. Some grew restless, longing to return to the stars. "We have lingered too long," said Ninhursag, the mother of mountains. "Let them inherit the world. Our work here is done." Others, like Inanna and Enki, wished to stay, to guide the next age of mankind. It was said that Inanna descended among humans, taking mortal form for a time, walking their streets, laughing in their feasts, and weeping at their losses. Her presence was felt like the warmth of the sun after rain, brief, brilliant, and unforgettable. In that golden age, cities grew grander still. The people of Ubar built temples that glowed in the sunset, their ziggurats towering higher than ever before. The kings claimed descent from the gods, and their names were carved into stone for eternity. The land prospered, the harvests were full, and music filled the night air. But deep within the earth, in the chambers where the Anunnaki once gathered, silence grew. One by one, the gods began to fade from mortal sight. Some returned to the heavens, their luminous forms vanishing into the stars. Others sank into the earth, their spirits resting beneath the mountains. Only a few remained, watchers, dreamers, whisperers in the night. The humans, feeling the absence of their divine teachers, turned to the stars themselves for guidance. They charted the movements of Venus, Jupiter, and Mars, believing each to be a sign of the gods. They built calendars and recorded eclipses, seeing in them the rhythm of creation. They no longer waited for the Anunnaki to return. They sought to understand their language written in the sky. But knowledge, once given, has its dangers. With each discovery, mankind grew bolder. The kings of Akkad and Babylon proclaimed themselves divine, claiming the right to rule all under heaven. Wars erupted, cities burned, and rivers ran red. Enlil watched from the winds and sighed. "See what they have become," he said. "Even now, they repeat our mistakes." And yet, in the quiet corners of the world, the old wisdom endured. In hidden sanctuaries, the priestesses of Inanna sang the hymns of the stars. In secret workshops, scholars traced the movements of the heavens, preserving knowledge against the decay of time. They believed the Anunnaki were not gone, only waiting for the moment when humanity was ready to stand beside them, not beneath them. Centuries would pass before that prophecy found voice again. But even then, as the torches burned low and the night deepened over the plains, there were those who swore they felt a presence, soft and ancient, like the hum of distant thunder. The Anunnaki, they said, were not a tale to fear, but a memory to honor. And when the stars once more aligned, their light would guide humanity home. Now, as the wind moves gently through the reeds of forgotten rivers, imagine the world they left behind. The shimmer of oil lamps in temple halls, the echo of sandals upon stone, the whisper of prayers rising to the heavens. Let the story drift through you like warm air through open doors. The gods are gone, but their dreams remain, woven into our own, timeless and still unfolding beneath the endless sky. In the still hours before dawn, the desert was silent, save for the low hum of wind brushing across the dunes. The moonlight poured over the ruins of old temples, broken walls, scattered bricks, and faint carvings that once told the story of gods who came from the heavens. The sands had long since buried their names, but the memory lingered in whispers. In the dreams of shepherds, in the songs of old priests, the Anunnaki were never truly gone. They had only stepped into the shadows, waiting for the right time to return. Far away from the sleeping cities, in the mountains near the Persian Gulf, a group of wanderers built their homes in caves. They were said to be descendants of the old scribes of Eridu, those who once served Enki himself. They kept the ancient language alive, chanting the hymns that had long faded from the temples of men. By firelight, they told their children of the Shining Ones, the Anunnaki who had taught humanity to speak, to write, to dream. They came from the stars, the elders would whisper, eyes glinting in the flame. From a world that circles the sun once every great age. And when it comes close again, their ships will cross the sky like falling suns. One of these wanderers, an old man named Camus, spent his life searching for proof. He believed that deep beneath the sands lay the tombs of the gods, their cities hidden and preserved by time. He carried with him a stone tablet, cracked and worn, inscribed with symbols older than any known tongue. He had found it near the ruins of Ubar, where it was said Enki once walked. The markings were strange. Some spoke of stars, others of tools that could move mountains or call down fire from the heavens. Night after night, Camus studied it, tracing the grooves with trembling fingers, trying to unlock its secrets. One evening, as the stars shimmered low on the horizon, Camus climbed a high ridge to watch the sky. There, a brilliant light appeared, slow, steady, and unlike any star. It moved across the heavens, then paused. His heart pounded as he fell to his knees. "Enki," he whispered, "is it you?" The light pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and then faded into the dark. Camus returned to his cave that night filled with wonder, knowing that whatever the Anunnaki were, they had not abandoned the world. Meanwhile, in the great cities along the rivers, the world was changing again. The kings of Babylon rose to power, their priests claiming to hear the voices of the gods in their dreams. Towering ziggurats pierced the skies, each one an imitation of the sacred mountain where the Anunnaki had first descended. The temples were filled with golden idols, but behind the glittering altars, few remembered the true meaning of the stories. Power had replaced faith. Rituals that were once acts of devotion had become performances for wealth and pride. In one such temple, high atop the ziggurat of Marduk, a young priestess named Lamishtu tended to the sacred flame. Her nights were spent reciting hymns to the heavens, her days in silence and study. But one night, as the air grew still and heavy, the flame flickered strangely. The smoke curled upward, forming patterns that shimmered with faint light. From within the smoke, she heard a voice, not loud, but deep, resonant, and kind. "Do not forget the first ones," it said. "Do not let their story die." Lamishta fell to her knees, trembling. "Who speaks?" she whispered. The voice continued, like the hum of water over stone. "We are the Watchers. The time will come when the gates of heaven open again, and the children of earth shall rise to meet us. Keep the knowledge safe. Guard the old songs. They are the bridge between us." And then the flame steadied, and the voice was gone. From that night on, Lamishta dedicated her life to preserving the forgotten lore. She gathered the old tablets buried beneath the temple floors, copying their words onto fresh clay. She learned the symbols of Enki, the codes that spoke of stars and cycles and great returns. And as years passed, her students spread her teachings far and wide. Across the land, new stories began to blend with the old. The Anunnaki became gods of the stars, guardians of knowledge, and bringers of balance. But while priests and scholars kept their faith alive, Others sought to use the knowledge for power. In the courts of kings, whispers spread of weapons forged by the gods, tools that could summon lightning or move mountains. One ruler after another sent men into the deserts, searching for the lost relics of the Anunnaki. Expeditions vanished into the sands, swallowed by storms. Some returned with fragments, metal that glowed faintly even after centuries, or crystals carved with strange, perfect patterns. The kings believed these were gifts of the gods, proof of their divine right to rule. Yet every gift came with a price. Those who wielded them grew greedy, their cities collapsing under the weight of their ambition. In time, the great empires of Mesopotamia began to crumble. Babylon fell, its ziggurats reduced to dust. The rivers changed course, and the fertile lands turned to wasteland. The people scattered, their languages mixing, their faiths changing. But still, the stories endured. In faraway lands, they became new myths, of gods from the sky, of teachers of wisdom, of beings who created man in their image. The names changed. Anu became El, Enki became Inanna became Ishtar, but their essence remained. Some said the Anunnaki had retreated beneath the earth, to the hidden kingdom of Apsu, where Enki's palace of crystal still shimmered in the darkness. Others claimed they had returned to the stars, watching from afar. And there were those who believed they had never left at all, that their blood ran in the veins of kings and dreamers, poets and prophets, anyone who looked at the night sky and felt that strange pull of memory. In the quiet of the desert night, as the sands whispered like waves, the wind carried the last echoes of their names. If one listened carefully, they might still hear it, the deep hum of the earth, the faint shimmer of the stars above, a song as old as creation itself. It was the song of the Anunnaki, the eternal bond between heaven and earth, between gods and men. So, as the night stretches long and calm, let your mind drift back to that world of clay and fire, of stars and whispered dreams. Imagine the lights moving across the sky, the distant echo of divine voices carried by the wind. The story of the Anunnaki is not only the story of gods, it is the story of us all, a memory carved into our bones, waiting to be awakened each time we look up and wonder where we came from. And perhaps, in that wondering, the gods still listen. Beneath the crimson glow of the setting sun, the land of Mesopotamia exhaled softly, its rivers gleaming like ribbons of light against the darkening soil. The people gathered near their fires, sharing bread and stories as shadows lengthened over the fields. The air was warm, and the distant hum of insects mixed with the quiet songs of herdsmen. In every village, there were whispers of the gods, tales of the Anunnaki that lingered in the hush between heartbeats. Though many had forgotten the old ways, there were still those who remembered, still those who felt that the gods had only stepped aside for a time. The world was older than anyone could imagine, and the stories that shaped it still lived in the silence of the stars. Among the elders of Ubar, there was a woman named Belit. Her hair was white as the salt plains, her eyes soft as dusk. She was known as a dream keeper, a woman who spoke the language of sleep. People came to her seeking comfort, wisdom, and sometimes prophecy. Each night, she lit a small lamp before her reed house and whispered the names of the old gods, Anu, Enlil, Enki, and Inanna. She said that when she closed her eyes, she could see them walking again among the stars, their faces both human and beyond human. One night, as Belit slept, she dreamt of a city not of brick and clay, but of light. Its towers glowed blue like the heart of a flame, and its streets shone with the reflection of 1,000 suns. In its center stood a temple of crystal, where figures moved like flowing water, their voices harmonizing in tones that felt like the pulse of the earth. A tall being stepped forward, his eyes shining like molten gold. "The time of silence nears its end," he said. "The world forgets, but we remember." When the stars return to their places, so shall we. Tell them, Belit, that all things move in cycles, and the dawn always follows the dark. When she awoke, the air around her felt heavy with purpose. The night still shimmered with the echo of the dream, and the lamp flame flickered as if moved by unseen breath. She went to the river at dawn, washed her hands in its cool water, and began to tell her people of what she had seen. Her words spread like the wind through the villages, stirring the hearts of those who still believed. Once more, the old songs were sung, the hymns of Enki and Inanna, the chants of the celestial return. The younger generations listened with wonder, but not all believed. To many, the Anunnaki were myths, stories to fill the gaps between harvests and storms. But for some, those stories were a kind of truth, one that lived not in stone or temple, but in the soul itself. They felt it in the rhythm of the earth, in the stars' slow dance above, in the sense that life itself was guided by something older, wiser, watching still. In the heart of Uruk, where traders crossed the desert and kings built walls that kissed the clouds, a new order of scribes arose. They called themselves the keepers of the 7 tablets. Their duty was not to worship, but to remember. They collected fragments of the old texts, piecing together the songs of creation, the tales of the flood, and the laws of the gods. They spoke of the time before time, when the Anunnaki shaped the earth and the heavens, and of how their wisdom had been passed down through symbols, numbers, and stars. One of these scribes, a quiet man named Ninur, spent his life searching for the 7th and final tablet, the one said to contain the secret of mankind's purpose. He wandered through ruins swallowed by sand, climbed broken ziggurats where only the wind now sang, and read inscriptions half erased by centuries. In one forgotten temple, deep beneath layers of dust, he found a chamber lined with carvings unlike any he had seen. The walls depicted tall figures holding spheres of light, and above them was written, "From the heavens we came, and to the heavens we shall return." At the chamber's center lay a stone, smooth and black as night. When Ninur touched it, he felt a warmth spread through his hand, a vibration soft yet immense. He saw, in a brief and blinding vision, the great ships of the gods descending once more through clouds of fire and gold. Then the vision was gone, and he stood alone, trembling in the silence. Ninur returned to Uruk, carrying only the memory of what he had seen. He wrote it down carefully, each symbol pressed into clay like a heartbeat. "The gods are not gone," he wrote. "They have merely changed their shape. We see them not in form, but in the spark that moves us to build, to seek, to dream." His words spread quietly among those who listened. Some called him mad, others a prophet. Yet the message endured, whispered from one scribe to another, from one age to the next. Generations passed, and kingdoms rose and fell. The rivers shifted course, the sands buried the old cities. But even as the world changed, echoes of the Anunnaki survived. Their names merged with those of new gods, Zeus, Osiris, Odin, different tongues speaking the same ancient memory. The stars were charted anew, but the same constellations still marked the heavens. The 7 sages of Enki became the teachers of later civilizations, their wisdom reborn in other forms, always carrying that faint glimmer of the divine. In distant lands, explorers spoke of hidden chambers deep beneath the earth, where strange inscriptions glowed faintly in the dark. Some claimed to hear low hums emanating from the stones, as though the earth itself remembered the voices of its makers. A few even said that in dreams, they saw tall figures wrapped in light, their faces calm, their words like music too vast to comprehend. And always, those who woke from such dreams felt a strange peace, as though reminded of something they had always known but forgotten. The story of the Anunnaki became a river, flowing through ages, changing shape, yet never drying. It moved through the cradle of Sumer, through Babylon, through Egypt and Greece, through every civilization that looked to the heavens and asked, "Where did we come from?" For even if their temples turned to dust, their essence lived on in the quiet yearning of humankind to understand its own beginning. And as night fell once more over the empty plains of ancient Mesopotamia, the stars shimmered above like a memory half awake. The wind carried the scent of old fires, the sigh of lost cities. Somewhere in that vast silence, perhaps beyond the reach of time itself, the Anunnaki watched still, patient, waiting, and ever near. So breathe deeply now, and let your mind drift across the ages. Imagine the first rivers gleaming under a young sun, the first temples rising toward the stars, the first humans looking up in awe and wonder. The story of the Anunnaki is the story of awakening, the slow remembering of where we began, and the quiet promise that one day we may remember fully again. The night over the ancient plains stretched endlessly, a velvet ocean of stars that seemed close enough to touch. The air was still, heavy with the scent of warm sand and the distant murmur of the river. Travelers along the Euphrates would often stop in silence, staring up at the same constellations their ancestors once revered. It was said that each of those stars held a memory, a record of the gods who had once walked among them, the Anunnaki. And somewhere, perhaps in the folds of the sky itself, those gods were listening still. Far from the bustle of cities, in a small settlement near the ruins of Eridu, there lived a man named Tammuz. He was not a priest nor a scholar, but a humble stonemason. By day he carved blocks for temples, and by night he sat by the riverbank, watching the stars and dreaming of worlds beyond. His father had told him old stories, tales of how the gods had shaped mankind from clay and breathed life into it with the essence of the stars. Most dismissed such tales as myth, but Tammuz felt something deeper, an ache that pulled at his soul when he gazed into the heavens. One night, as he worked late, he noticed a strange light glowing faintly near the ruins. It pulsed rhythmically, like the beating of a heart. Drawn by curiosity, he followed it through the crumbling stones until he reached what had once been a temple wall. The light seemed to flow from the cracks themselves. He reached out and brushed away centuries of dust, revealing markings unlike any he had seen, symbols that shimmered faintly in the dark. They were not Sumerian, nor Akkadian, nor any tongue known to men. The moment his fingers traced them, he felt warmth flood his body, and a voice, not quite sound, not quite thought, filled his mind. "We remember you," it said, "and you remember us." Tammuz stumbled back, breath catching in his chest. The glow faded, but the words lingered. That night he could not sleep. His dreams were filled with visions, tall figures surrounded by light, hands weaving the air into form, rivers flowing backward through time. When he awoke, he found strange symbols drawn in the sand beside him, identical to those on the temple wall. His hands trembled. He hadn't drawn them, but the lines were clear and purposeful. In the days that followed, Tammuz began to carve those symbols into his stones. He didn't know why, only that it felt right. The other masons noticed, and some grew fearful. They whispered that he was possessed, touched by spirits. But a few, those who still carried faith in the old gods, came to him in secret, asking what he had seen. He told them little, for the visions were hard to explain. Yet word spread quietly until even the elders heard. One evening, the high priest of Eridu summoned Tammuz. The priest was old, his face carved with lines of worry and wisdom. "You bear the marks of the sky," he said, studying the carvings. "I have seen these once before, long ago, in a dream that came after a comet blazed across the heavens. The same voice spoke to me then, saying that the gods would one day awaken through the memory of men." He leaned closer, eyes glinting with curiosity. "Tell me, stonemason, do you think they are returning?" Tammuz hesitated. "I do not know," he said softly, "but something stirs. The earth hums. The stars burn brighter. It feels as if they are calling us back. The priest nodded slowly, as though the answer confirmed something he had long feared and hoped. "Then the world will change again," he whispered, "for the gods do not move without purpose." From that night on, strange events began to ripple through the land. The river flooded early, bringing fertile soil to barren fields. Shepherds reported seeing lights dancing above the ziggurats. A soft vibration hummed in the earth beneath sleeping villages, like the rhythm of a giant heart deep below. And in their dreams, people began to hear music, low, resonant, and filled with sorrow. The old words of Sumer returned to their lips, as though the language of the gods was awakening within them. Tammuz became a figure of quiet mystery. Some sought him for guidance, others avoided him in fear. But he himself was neither prophet nor priest. He was only a man caught between two worlds, burdened with memories that were not entirely his own. Sometimes, when he stood by the river at night, he saw shadows in the starlight, tall forms walking across the water, their faces calm, their eyes like reflections of the moon. They did not speak, but he felt their presence, ancient and vast. Years passed, and the world continued its turning. Kingdoms shifted, rulers rose and fell, yet the story of the Anunnaki endured in whispers. The scribes wrote it into the margins of their tablets, the storytellers wove it into their songs, and the masons carved it into their stones. It was as if some unseen hand ensured that the memory could never truly die. Long after Tammuz was gone, travelers would still come upon the ruins of Eridu and find the glowing symbols faintly etched into the stones, still pulsing with that same quiet light when touched beneath the moon. Many thought it was a trick of the sand or some natural glow from mineral veins. But others, the dreamers and wanderers, felt the truth beneath the surface. The gods were not gone. They were asleep, waiting for the time when mankind would be ready to see them not as masters, but as kin. And so the story continued, carried like wind across the centuries. Each age told it differently, yet the essence remained. That the Anunnaki had come not only to create, but to teach, to awaken the spark of divinity that slept within humanity. And that someday, when the stars once more aligned as they had in the first age, that spark would blaze again, and gods and men would walk together as they once did beneath the silver rivers of the ancient world. Now, as the night deepens, let your mind drift to those faraway times. Imagine the gentle hum of the earth beneath you, the shimmer of forgotten symbols carved in stone, the soft light of a distant dawn returning after 1,000 ages of dark. The gods of old are silent now, but silence too is a kind of song. And if you listen closely, perhaps in your dreams tonight, you might still hear their voices carried softly on the wind, calling you home, across the endless expanse of time. The air above the plains was thick with summer heat, and the horizon shimmered like liquid gold. Villages rested in silence beneath the sun, their people slow and thoughtful beneath the weight of the afternoon. In those quiet hours, when the world itself seemed to hold its breath, stories were told not aloud, but in the heart, memories whispered from one generation to the next. And in these whispers lived the tale of how the Anunnaki once shaped the destiny of humankind. Far to the east of what was once Sumer, in a region of rolling hills and hidden springs, there stood a lonely shrine built into the side of a cliff. The locals called it the House of the Seven Winds, and few dared to enter. Inside, they said, were carvings so old that even the priests could not read them. Some claimed the shrine was older than the flood itself, older than the first kings, built by hands that were not entirely human. In a nearby village lived a young woman named Ishtarani, known for her gift of dreams. When she slept, her mind wandered beyond the world, drifting into places no one else could see. Her mother said she had been touched by the gods before she was born. Others feared her, whispering that her eyes saw too much. Yet Ishtarani carried her gift quietly, finding peace in solitude and the rhythm of the stars. One evening, as dusk folded into night, she felt a pull toward the hills. The moon rose pale and round, and a soft wind seemed to beckon her forward. She followed the path until she reached the mouth of the shrine. The air inside was cool and heavy, filled with the scent of stone and dust. She lit a small lamp and stepped into the darkness. As the flame flickered, the walls began to reveal themselves. Carvings of winged beings stretched along the stone, tall, graceful, their faces serene. Between them ran spirals, stars, and unfamiliar markings that seemed to move when the light touched them. At the center of the chamber stood a flat altar of black basalt, its surface smooth and strangely warm beneath her fingertips. The moment she touched it, the lamp dimmed, and the air hummed softly. A light appeared above the altar, faint at first, then brightening into the form of a figure, tall, robed in silver light, with eyes like amber fire. The figure spoke not with words, but with presence, a voice that seemed to echo within her chest. "Child of clay and breath," it said gently, "you have heard our call." Ishtarani's voice trembled. "Who are you?" "We are what you once were," the figure replied, "and what you may yet become. We are the Anunnaki, the keepers of the seed that dwells in the heart of mankind." The light around the figure shimmered like water under the sun. Images filled her mind. A garden vast and green beneath a twin sun, rivers of light flowing into golden seas, and beings of radiance shaping mountains with their hands. "Why have you called me here?" she whispered. "Because remembrance must return," the voice said. "The world forgets, and when memory fades, balance is lost. You, who dream in the language of the stars, must awaken others, not with fear, but with peace. Tell them that the divine is not above them, but within. Tell them we never left. We sleep within your hearts, waiting for you to remember." The vision flickered, and the figure began to fade. "When the stars rise in the pattern of the dragon's eye," it said softly, "look to the east. The gates of knowledge will open once more." Then the light vanished, leaving only the trembling flame of the lamp. Ishtarani stood in silence for a long time, her heart racing with wonder and disbelief. When she finally left the shrine, the first light of dawn touched the sky. She walked home with tears in her eyes, not of fear, but of a strange, quiet joy. In the days that followed, her dreams grew stronger. She saw the faces of people she did not know, builders, scholars, travelers, all carrying fragments of the same ancient message. She wrote them down on clay tablets, filling them with symbols she barely understood. The villagers began to notice her calm presence, the glow in her eyes, and slowly they came to listen. She told them of unity, of remembrance, of the spark of the divine that lives within all beings. Some laughed, some doubted, but a few felt something stir deep within, a faint memory, like the echo of a forgotten song. They began to gather at the shrine, lighting lamps and singing the old hymns of Sumer once more. The words, though ancient, felt familiar, as if their souls recognized them. And in the stillness of the night, when the last lamp had burned low, Ishtarani would gaze at the stars and feel the pulse of something vast and eternal moving through her veins. She realized then that the story of the Anunnaki was not only a tale of gods and creation, it was the story of awakening, a reminder that humanity was not born in ignorance, but descended from light, each soul carrying a spark of that divine flame. Years later, when Ishtarani had grown old and the shrine had become overgrown with vines, travelers would still visit it, drawn by dreams they could not explain. Many claimed to hear a faint hum from within the stone, a vibration like a heartbeat. And when they touched the altar, some said they saw flashes of stars, wings, and the golden eyes of beings too beautiful to name. The House of the Seven Winds became a place of quiet pilgrimage. Scholars came seeking wisdom, mystics seeking peace, wanderers seeking purpose. And though the world around it changed, kingdoms rising and falling like waves, the shrine endured. It was said that in the moment before death, when the soul slips between waking and dream, those who had visited the shrine would see the same figure Ishtarani once saw, a being of light, waiting with open arms. And as their final breath left them, they would hear a whisper carried on the wind, "Welcome home, child of the stars." So now, as you drift deeper into rest, imagine the moonlit hills, the silent shrine, the soft hum of the earth beneath your body. The story of the Anunnaki is not one of distance, but of return. You are part of it just as they are part of you, ancient, luminous, and eternal. Breathe softly, and let that truth cradle you as you sink into the deep, peaceful sea of sleep. The wind over the desert was low and endless, whispering through the sands like the breath of time itself. The stars shimmered in their countless numbers above, silver dust strewn across the velvet sky, and the dunes glowed faintly beneath the moon. Somewhere among those rolling sands lay the forgotten bones of the first cities, Erduruk, Nippur, each one holding stories older than stone, older than kings. The night belonged to silence, but beneath that silence, something stirred, as if the earth itself remembered what had once been written into its heart. Far from the rivers, where the land turned to golden wasteland, a small caravan made its way beneath the stars. The travelers were scholars from distant lands, seekers of what they called the language of origins. They had heard tales of ruins buried deep beneath the desert, ruins said to hold inscriptions not of men, but of the gods. Among them was a quiet man named Asarel, a historian of forgotten faiths, whose dreams had been haunted for months by visions of towering figures cloaked in light. He did not speak of them to the others, but he carried an ache in his chest that words could not describe. For many nights they wandered, following the pattern of the constellations. Then, on the seventh night, they came upon a strange formation, half-buried columns of obsidian-like stone rising from the sand. The columns were carved with spiral grooves, and when the moonlight struck them, faint lines glowed within, like veins of starlight. The group set up camp nearby, their torches flickering against the black stone. Asarel approached one of the columns and placed his hand upon it. The surface was warm, impossibly so for stone in the cool desert night. A faint vibration passed through his fingers, traveling up his arm and into his chest, steady as a heartbeat. And then, just as he was about to pull away, he heard it, a voice, soft and distant, not in his ears but in his mind. "We have waited," it said, each word a ripple in the stillness. "The time of remembering draws near." Asarel stumbled backward, eyes wide, his torchlight dancing across the sand. The others saw only confusion in his face, and he told them nothing, for he knew they would not understand. But that night, as the fire crackled low, he sat awake, staring at the sky, unable to shake the feeling that the stars were watching him back. When dawn came, they began to dig. The desert gave way reluctantly, spilling grains like ancient secrets. After hours of work, they uncovered a flat slab of stone covered in symbols that seemed to shimmer when the sun touched them. The markings were unlike any known script, yet somehow familiar, as if part of every language descended from these same shapes. "This is older than Sumer," whispered one of the scholars. "Older than any record we have." Asarel knelt beside the stone and traced the first symbol, a circle enclosed by 7 rays. The moment he did, the air trembled. A low hum filled the ground beneath them, and the sand around the slab began to shift, revealing steps leading downward. The group exchanged startled glances. Without hesitation, Asarel took his torch and descended. The staircase spiraled deep into the earth, where the air grew cool and heavy. At the bottom, he found himself in a vast chamber. The walls glowed faintly, covered in carvings of winged figures and orbs of light. At the center stood a massive disk of gold, half buried in sand. It pulsed slowly as though alive. And around it, in perfect symmetry, stood 7 stone statues, each one carved in the likeness of a god. Their eyes were made of some translucent crystal that caught the torchlight and scattered it into rainbows across the room. Asarel approached the disk, his footsteps echoing softly. On its surface were words in the old tongue, the Sumerian of creation myths. He read them aloud slowly, reverently. "We came from the stars. We shaped the clay. And from clay we made memory." As he spoke the final word, the air shifted again. A low resonance filled the chamber, and the statue's eyes began to glow. The golden disk trembled and emitted a deep, melodic tone, like the ringing of an unseen bell. Asarel felt a warmth spread through his chest, the same pulse he had felt in the desert. The others called his name from above, but their voices sounded far away, as though muffled by water. And then he saw them. The statues were no longer stone. They were alive, 7 luminous figures standing before him, their faces calm, their presence vast. He fell to his knees, overcome by awe and fear. The tallest among them stepped forward, its voice resonating within the very air. "Do not fear, child of earth," it said. "We are the memory you have forgotten. We are the breath that gave you form, and the spark that burns still within your kind. Long have you wandered, blind to your own light. But the time of sleep ends. The cycle begins anew." Asarel could not speak. His heart pounded, his breath shallow. The figure extended a hand, long, graceful, almost human, and touched his forehead. In an instant, visions flooded his mind. He saw worlds spinning in the void, ships of silver descending through storms of fire, and the first humans rising from rivers of light. He saw the Anunnaki teaching the early tribes to read the stars, to shape stone, to call the names of creation. And he saw, too, their sorrow as they left, retreating to the heavens when humanity chose war over wisdom. When the visions faded, he was alone again. The statues stood silent and lifeless, the glow gone from their eyes. The chamber was still, the hum vanished. The others soon descended, finding him on his knees, tears streaming down his face. He said only one thing: they were here. They returned to their homeland with the inscription tablets and their memories. Some of them denied what they had seen, calling it illusion or fever. But Asarel knew better. He wrote what he had witnessed in secret, preserving the words on clay tablets that would one day be found by another seeker, centuries hence. And so, the story continued, quietly, like an underground river. The memory of the Anunnaki passed not through temples or kings, but through dreamers, wanderers, those who dared to listen when the earth whispered. Now, as you breathe softly, imagine those 7 figures standing still beneath the sands, their eyes waiting for the light of another dawn. The desert is vast, but it remembers. The stars are far, but they listen. And perhaps, in the deep silence of your own heart, the same ancient pulse still beats, the quiet rhythm of creation itself, the voice of the gods who never truly left. The evenings settled gently over the lands once called Sumer, and the last traces of sunlight lingered like embers in the west. The rivers shimmered with the reflection of the stars, and the fields were hushed, the cattle lying still as the world held its breath. It was a time between worlds, where reality and memory blended, and where stories that had been whispered for centuries resurfaced, carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. In the distance, the ziggurats stood like sentinels, their shadows stretching long over villages that had long forgotten the gods who had inspired their creation. In a small settlement near the Tigris, there lived a man named Ubar. He was neither priest nor king, but a keeper of stories. His father had been a scribe, and before that, a mason who had carved temples in the image of the gods. Ubar spent his days cataloging fragments of tablets, inscribing what little he could salvage from the ruins of forgotten cities. The people often asked him why he bothered, why he chased shadows of a past that no longer served them. But Ubar knew something that most had forgotten. The past never truly dies, and the Anunnaki left more than monuments. They left memory itself embedded in the hearts of mankind. One night, as the stars drifted across the blackened sky like drifting embers, Ubar was visited by a dream unlike any other. He found himself walking along a river not of water, but of liquid light. Its currents carried figures made of energy, moving gracefully, teaching, guiding, shaping. The tallest among them extended a hand to him, and in its gesture was both command and invitation. Ubar understood without words. He was being shown the beginning, the creation of humanity itself. He saw the Anunnaki descend from the heavens in ships that glimmered like falling stars, their hands sculpting men and women from clay, breathing into them the essence of consciousness. When he awoke, the morning air was crisp, and the scent of the river mingled with the earth. Ubar knew that what he had witnessed was not a dream but a memory imprinted into his soul. He hurried to his small archive and began to write feverishly, clay tablet after clay tablet, filling each with depictions of what he had seen. He drew symbols of the stars, the forms of the Anunnaki, and the flow of energy that connected the heavens to the earth. Word spread quietly of his work, and soon others came to see the tablets. Scholars, travelers, and even children gathered to gaze at the intricate carvings, each symbol resonating with something deep within. Some saw only pictures, others sensed the pulse of history and divinity intertwined. And in every face, there was a flicker of recognition, as if the memory of the gods had been dormant in their own hearts, waiting for someone to awaken it. Ubar knew that the knowledge he possessed was fragile. The kings and priests who ruled the cities might see it as heresy or threat. They would not understand that the Anunnaki were not mere rulers or gods to be worshipped, but teachers who had embedded wisdom into the essence of humankind. So he kept much of it hidden, storing the tablets in secret chambers beneath his house, guarding them as one would guard the flame of life itself. Years passed, and Ubar grew older. His hair turned silver, and his eyes carried the quiet weight of understanding. Yet he never ceased his work. He continued to teach those who sought him out, sharing fragments of the story, careful to instill both reverence and curiosity. He spoke of Enki, the giver of knowledge, of Enlil, the enforcer of order, of Inanna, the goddess of love and war, who walked among men to guide them, and of Anu, the sky father who watched from above. His words wove a tapestry of history, myth, and truth that left listeners awed and reflective. In the quiet of the desert night, as Ubar gazed at the stars, he often felt their presence, the subtle pull of something vast, eternal, and unseen. He would close his eyes and imagine the Anunnaki observing the human world, watching the cycles of empires, the rise and fall of cities, the small triumphs and tragedies of ordinary life. And in that moment, he understood something profound. Humanity was both the legacy and the continuation of the gods' work, a living testament to their presence, even in absence. Before his final days, Ubar chose to place his tablets in a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of a temple that had survived the shifting sands. He inscribed one final message for future generations. Remember, for in remembering you awaken the light that has always lived within. The Anunnaki were never gone. They sleep in the pulse of the earth, in the rhythm of the stars, and in the heart of every being. And so, as centuries passed and the cities of men crumbled into dust, the memory endured. Scholars rediscovered fragments, travelers whispered tales of shining beings in the night sky, and dreamers continued to see visions of the luminous figures that had walked among the first humans. Now, as you lay your head and drift deeper into the quiet of sleep, imagine yourself walking beside Ubar along the banks of the River of Light. Feel the pulse of the ancient world beneath your feet, the soft glow of knowledge awakening within. The Anunnaki are not lost. They live in memory, in dreams, and in the quiet moments when the universe itself seems to breathe in harmony with your own heartbeat. Let that thought cradle you as you sink into rest, surrounded by the eternal presence of the gods who shaped your beginning. The wind whispered over the ancient plains where Sumer once thrived, carrying the scent of sand, stone, and memory. The cities that had once gleamed under the rule of gods and kings were now silent beneath layers of time. Yet even in the silence, something stirred. The earth itself seemed to hum faintly, a low resonance that only those who listened closely could sense. It was said that beneath the soil, deeper than any temple or tomb, the remnants of the Anunnaki's world still pulsed faintly, machines of light, gateways of stone, and archives of wisdom buried long before the first empires fell. In a quiet village near the ruins of Eridu, a young woman named Asha often wandered to the edge of the old foundations. She was drawn there by dreams that would not leave her. Night after night, she dreamt of a golden city bathed in the light of twin suns, where towering beings moved with grace beyond comprehension. They spoke to her not in words but in tones, melodies that resonated in her chest like the echo of creation itself. She had told no one of these dreams, for she feared being called mad. But each morning, she woke with the feeling that something ancient was calling her name. One evening, when the moon rose full and pale over the desert, Asha followed her instincts and ventured beyond the worn stones that marked the old city. The air was still, but the ground beneath her feet vibrated softly, as though alive. She placed her palm on the earth and closed her eyes. A vision came to her, vast halls carved from crystal, symbols glowing along the walls, and figures with eyes that shone like distant stars. One of them stepped forward, a tall form cloaked in radiance. It spoke softly, and though she could not understand the language, she felt the meaning bloom in her heart. We never left. We wait for those who remember. When she opened her eyes, tears traced her cheeks. The place around her seemed to shimmer faintly, as though the veil between worlds had thinned. She realized then that she stood atop a buried chamber. Driven by a force she could not name, she began to dig. The night stretched long, her fingers raw and her breath shallow, until her hands struck something smooth and cold, stone, but not of earthly make. It was luminous even in the moonlight. Brushing the dust away, she uncovered a panel etched with ancient cuneiform symbols, glowing faintly as if awakened by her touch. The script pulsed gently, and the air thickened with warmth. Asha felt a rush of energy rise through her body, as though time itself had bent around her. She saw flashes, cities of light floating above the earth, towers that touched the sky, rivers of molten gold flowing between worlds. She saw the Anunnaki in their full glory, not as gods to be worshipped but as beings of purpose, guardians of balance, stewards of creation. And she understood their sadness, for they had loved humanity deeply but had to depart when humankind grew restless with their presence, choosing pride over harmony. When dawn came, Asha stumbled back to her village, dazed but alive with revelation. She tried to explain to the elders what she had found, but they looked upon her with disbelief. They told her that the dreams of the gods were not for mortals to follow, that such visions led only to ruin. But Asha knew otherwise. The truth burned in her heart like a second sun. She returned to the site every night, meditating, listening, waiting for the voice again. And one night, it returned. The figure of light appeared once more, and behind it, others emerged, tall, graceful, eyes like mirrored starlight. They circled her in silence, their presence both calming and immense. The first one spoke again. The time will come when humanity remembers what it has forgotten. You are one of the bridges between then and now. Guard what you have seen. Speak only when the stars align once more." The words sank deep into her soul, and then the vision faded. When she awoke, the panel she had uncovered was gone, buried once again by the desert winds, as if protecting itself from eyes not ready to see. Asha never spoke of the encounter again, but she wrote of it in secret, engraving her story on clay and sealing it in jars she hid near the ruins. Generations later, those jars would be found, broken, weathered, yet legible enough to stir curiosity among scholars. They would argue whether the story was myth or memory, whether Asha was a prophet or a poet lost to time. But in quiet moments, those who read her words would feel something, a quiet stirring in their chest, a pull toward the stars. And perhaps that was the true gift of the Anunnaki, not the temples, not the knowledge of stone and sky, but the seed of remembrance planted deep within the human soul. Even when forgotten, even when doubted, that spark waited patiently, whispering through dreams and echoing in the hearts of those willing to listen. As the night deepens, imagine Asha beneath the moon, the sands glowing faintly around her as the ancient hum rises once more. Somewhere beneath her feet, the light of the Anunnaki still sleeps, waiting for the day when the children of Earth will awaken fully to who they truly are, descendants of stars, carriers of divine memory, wanderers guided always by the rhythm of creation. Let that thought cradle you now, soft and warm, as the timeless story of the Anunnaki hums quietly in your dreams. The stars drifted slowly above the sleeping desert, ancient witnesses to the endless cycle of time. Their glow painted the dunes in soft silver, and somewhere in the distance, the wind moved like an invisible tide across the earth. Beneath that vast and silent sky, there were places where time folded into itself, where the past brushed against the present like a whisper carried on the air. It was in such a place that a traveler named Daram found himself one long night, his path guided by nothing but instinct and the quiet pulse of something calling from beneath the sand. He had wandered far from the cities, through ruins and forgotten shrines, following faint markings carved into stone walls, symbols of the stars that pointed always toward the east. His companions had turned back long ago, fearful of the stories surrounding the desert. They spoke of lights that appeared in the sky, of echoes of voices that came from beneath the ground, and of dreams that clung to the mind like fog. But Daram was not afraid. He had grown up hearing tales of the Anunnaki from his grandmother, stories spoken in the soft tone of a lullaby. She had told him that the gods had never truly left. They had simply gone deeper, waiting for the world to remember them. As he walked, the air grew still, and the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, aligning into a pattern that felt oddly familiar. He stopped, looking around, and saw the faint outline of stone half buried in the sand. He knelt, brushing the dust away, and there, carved in perfect precision, was the emblem of the eight-pointed star, the symbol of the divine order of Anu. His breath caught. He had seen this mark only once before, in an ancient tablet locked away in the archives of Nippur. That symbol had been said to mark the entrance to a place the priests once called the Chamber of Origins. The wind rose suddenly, whirling around him, and the ground beneath his hands trembled softly. The sand shifted, revealing a circular slab of dark stone. In its center was a small depression, just large enough for a human hand. Without hesitation, Daram pressed his palm against it. The stone responded with a deep hum, vibrating under his touch. Light spilled from the edges of the slab, thin lines of gold tracing ancient pathways into the sand. Then, as if the earth itself exhaled, the slab sank downward, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Daram hesitated for only a moment before stepping down. The air was cool and heavy, carrying the scent of minerals and something older, something almost electric. As he descended, faint lights appeared along the walls, illuminating symbols and depictions of beings with wings, eyes like suns, and hands raised toward the heavens. The deeper he went, the stronger the hum became, vibrating through his bones. When he reached the bottom, the staircase opened into a vast chamber carved from black stone that gleamed like glass. In the center of the chamber stood a great pillar of crystal, suspended in the air by invisible force. Inside it swirled currents of golden light that pulsed like a living heart. Around it were inscriptions in Sumerian script, and though Daram could not read them fluently, he understood them in some instinctive way. They spoke of balance between heaven and earth, of knowledge shared and lost, of the cycle of return. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a connection to something vast and ancient, as if the chamber itself recognized him. Then, as he reached out to touch the pillar, his surroundings shifted. He was no longer underground but standing beneath an open sky, in a world of gold and light. Towers of crystalline material rose around him, and beings of radiant form moved gracefully through the air. He felt no fear, only awe. One of them approached, its eyes reflecting galaxies. "You are a seeker," the being said softly, the voice both within and beyond him. "The memory awakens through you. The time of silence draws near its end." He wanted to ask what it meant, but words failed him. The being extended a hand, and for a brief instant, Daram saw everything. The rise of the first cities, the descent of the Anunnaki, the creation of humanity, the departure of the gods when men turned to war, and the long slumber of memory that followed. He saw Asha, the dreamer who had uncovered the glowing stone, and Ubar, the scribe who had preserved the first truths. They were all connected, bound across time by the same whisper that had called to him in the desert. When he awoke, he was lying on the surface again, the dawn light spreading across the sands. The spiral staircase was gone, and the slab lay silent, half buried once more. But in his hand, Daram held a small fragment of crystal, pulsing softly with golden light. He understood that it was not meant to be kept as a treasure but as a reminder, a seed of memory to awaken others when the world was ready. He returned to the cities, sharing his story quietly among scholars and wanderers, planting the tale like a seed in the minds of those who listened. Most dismissed it as myth. Some, however, felt a strange resonance when they heard it, as though something inside them stirred at the sound of the name Anunnaki. And so the story continued, passed from one generation to the next, carried by those who dreamed of a time when gods and mortals walked side by side beneath the same stars. Now, as the night deepens, let your breathing slow and imagine yourself walking beside Daram under that ancient sky. The sands are cool beneath your feet, and the wind hums softly like the echo of eternity. Somewhere below, the heart of the earth still beats with the memory of the Anunnaki, waiting for those who remember to awaken it once more. Let the rhythm of the universe cradle you, gentle and infinite, as you drift deeper into sleep, where time folds and the gods still whisper in the language of dreams. The night hung heavy over the remains of what had once been great cities, the ziggurats and temples now little more than skeletons of stone beneath a sky that seemed impossibly vast. The air was still, but there was a subtle hum beneath it, a vibration that threaded through the ground like the heartbeat of the world. Travelers who ventured into these lands often spoke of feelings of being watched, of whispers in the wind that carried words not meant for human ears. Yet for those attuned to the rhythm of the earth, it was a call, a reminder of the presence that had never truly left. In the small village of Shurapak, a young man named Eshar spent his nights gazing at the stars. He was a quiet observer, not a priest nor a scholar, but he had always felt drawn to the heavens. His dreams were filled with strange visions, towers of shimmering light, figures moving like liquid fire, and rivers flowing not with water but with radiance. Each morning he awoke with fragments of memory that were not his own. A sense of history stretching far beyond his life, of knowledge older than the oldest texts. One night, as the moon rose silver and full, he felt a pull toward the ruins of a nearby ziggurat. The villagers warned him not to go, whispering that the place was haunted by the spirits of gods and kings, but Eshar could not resist. He walked under the starlight, the sand cool beneath his feet, until he reached a hidden entrance carved into the base of the structure. A faint glow emanated from within, pulsing softly like the breath of something alive. He descended into the depths, the walls etched with symbols that seemed to shift as he moved past them. Some were familiar from the clay tablets he had studied, but others were foreign, radiating a quiet energy that filled the chamber. At the center, he found a stone altar surrounded by 7 statues, each one more magnificent than the last. Their eyes, crafted from some translucent crystal, seemed to reflect the stars themselves, and the air thrummed with a resonance that made his chest ache with recognition. As Eshar approached, the statue's eyes began to glow, bathing the chamber in soft, golden light. A presence filled the space, and he felt himself being enveloped in warmth. Then, in a voice that was both within and beyond him, he heard, "You have remembered. The memory is awakening. The Anunnaki watch, and their knowledge flows through those who listen." Images flooded his mind. He saw the first cities rise under the guidance of beings of immense power and wisdom. He saw the Anunnaki shaping humanity, teaching them to read the stars, cultivate the land, and build structures that mirrored the heavens. He witnessed the departure of these gods when mankind's pride and desire for power disrupted the balance, leaving only fragments of memory embedded in the hearts of humans. And he saw how those fragments had survived across generations, waiting for those who could hear their call. When he came back to the surface, the dawn was breaking, washing the desert in pale gold. Eshar felt changed, as if the chamber had imprinted something eternal upon his soul. He returned to his village, careful with his words, for he knew that such knowledge could be misunderstood. Yet he began to teach, quietly guiding those who were ready to listen. He spoke of harmony, of remembering one's place in the cosmos, and of the spark of divinity that lies within every being. Over time, his teachings spread beyond Shurapak, touching the minds of travelers and scribes, dreamers and wanderers. They began to see patterns in the stars, to hear the whispers in the wind, to feel the pulse of the earth as more than mere chance. The story of the Anunnaki, long buried under dust and time, was rekindled in subtle ways, carried through the hearts of those who sought not power but understanding. And so, even as empires rose and fell, even as the deserts claimed the remnants of stone and clay, the memory endured. It traveled silently, unseen but ever-present, a thread connecting humanity to its divine origin. Eshar's journey was not unique. It was part of the eternal cycle of remembering, a cycle that would continue as long as someone dared to listen, to feel, to dream. Now, as you breathe softly and settle deeper into the calm of night, imagine yourself following Eshar beneath the starlit sky. Feel the subtle hum of the earth beneath you, the glow of the ancient chamber warming your spirit. The Anunnaki, though distant, remain near, in dreams, in memory, and in the quiet moments when the universe itself seems to breathe with you. Let that knowledge lull you gently into sleep, carried on the timeless rhythm of creation and remembrance. The moon rose over the ancient plains, a pale lantern casting its quiet light upon the ruins that dotted the desert like scattered bones of a forgotten age. The sands had shifted for millennia, but still the remnants of temples and broken statues stood, stubborn against time, whispering stories only the wind could understand. To most, they were relics of myth, symbols of kings and gods that no longer mattered. But to a few, they were more than stone and dust. They were keys. Far to the north of Sumer's heartland, In a region where the desert met the mountains, there lived a solitary wanderer named Daram. He was a man of the stars, one who read their movements not as omens but as messages. His ancestors had been stargazers and priests, yet his own path was different. He believed that the stars were not gods, but homes, places where divine beings had once come from and would one day return. Many dismissed him as a dreamer, but his eyes carried the stillness of someone who had seen beyond the veil of the ordinary. For years, Daram followed a pattern he had charted from ancient Sumerian texts, a celestial alignment that repeated only once every many centuries. The writing spoke of a gate of Anu, a moment when the heavens and the earth would briefly mirror each other, and light from the constellation of the Bull would touch the ground where the gods had first descended. He believed that when this alignment came again, it would awaken what the old ones had left sleeping beneath the mountains. As the appointed night drew near, Daram climbed to a plateau surrounded by jagged cliffs, where an ancient circle of black stones stood half-buried in the dust. The carvings upon them were faint, but their meaning vibrated deep in his bones, the sigils of the Anunnaki. The air was cold and still, and the stars above burned with unusual clarity. Slowly, the constellation shifted into place, the bright eye of Taurus gleaming directly above the circle. The ground began to tremble. From the spaces between the stones, light seeped upward, not like fire, but like water, flowing, alive, and filled with quiet energy. The sky above seemed to bend, as if responding to the pulse of the earth. Then, out of the light, a shape emerged, a towering figure of shimmering gold, neither solid nor smoke, with eyes that reflected eternity. Daram fell to his knees, unable to speak, but the being's voice came not as sound but as presence, wrapping around him in warmth and stillness. "You have come at the turning of cycles," it said. "The gates open only to those who remember." Daram trembled. Are you of them?" "I am of all that was and will be," the voice replied gently. "I am memory given form. The Anunnaki do not die, they transform. Their essence flows through time, through earth, through you." The light expanded, and Daram saw visions unspool before him. The construction of the first cities, the rivers shaped by divine machines, the beings of light teaching humankind to mold clay, plant seed, and chart the stars. He saw the departure, the sorrow of the Anunnaki as they watched humanity's wars tear apart what they had built. And then he saw the long silence, the waiting, the quiet hope that someday humans would remember not their gods, but their own divine origin. When the vision faded, Daram was left alone beneath the stars, the light receding back into the earth. But something within him had changed. He felt the pulse of life in everything, the stones, the wind, even his own heartbeat, moving in perfect rhythm with the same energy he had witnessed. The circle of stones was silent once more, yet the air carried a faint hum, as if the earth were singing a song only he could hear. In the years that followed, Daram recorded what he had seen, carving symbols upon obsidian tablets, blending star lore with stories of divine creation. His writings would later be discovered by wanderers and scholars, half-eroded, yet unmistakably powerful. They spoke not of gods demanding worship, but of ancient teachers who had entrusted humanity with their own light. And though Daram passed into legend, his story endured. Those who gazed at the stars and felt that strange ache of recognition would remember his name, whispering that he had stood at the gate of Anu and lived to tell what he saw. Now, as the night deepens around you, imagine those same stars above your own quiet world, the same constellations that guided Daram long ago. Feel their steady glow on your skin, ancient and patient. The light you see has traveled through time, through ages, carrying with it the same whisper that called to him. Remember who you are. You are of the heavens and of the earth. You are the bridge between what was and what will be. Let that truth settle into your breathing, gentle and slow. Let it cradle you, as the voice of the universe hums softly beneath your dreams. And as you drift deeper into stillness, know that somewhere, the Anunnaki's memory still waits, not in the sky above, but in the quiet spark of eternity within you. The wind whispered over the empty plains, soft and steady like the breath of a sleeping world. The moon drifted high above the horizon, bathing the ancient landscape in pale silver light. Beneath its glow, the remnants of what had once been mighty civilizations rested beneath the sands, buried temples, fractured idols, and the bones of stories long forgotten. Yet even in the stillness, there was a hum, faint and deep, like the pulse of the earth remembering something sacred. Far from the cities, on a lonely stretch of desert near the Euphrates, a group of quiet monks kept an ancient vigil. They were not bound by a religion of gods and kings, but by a lineage of memory, guardians of stories passed down in whispers for thousands of years. Among them was a young initiate named Daram, whose duty was to copy the old texts onto fresh clay tablets before the originals crumbled to dust. But the words he transcribed haunted him. They spoke not of myths, but of visitors, beings of light who had walked with humanity in the time before memory. Daram often worked through the night, listening to the sound of the wind brushing the temple walls. He felt that the words on the clay were alive, that when he pressed his stylus into the wet surface, something ancient moved within him, guiding his hand. One night, as the lamps burned low, he came upon a fragment of text older than any he had seen. The script was unfamiliar, the shapes of the symbols curving like constellations. When he traced them with his fingers, the air seemed to shimmer faintly, and a sound, soft and melodic, filled the chamber. Startled, he looked around, but the other monks were asleep. The light from his lamp flickered, and for a heartbeat, he saw the faint outline of a figure standing in the corner of the room, tall, radiant, neither man nor shadow. The air around it pulsed gently, and though no words were spoken, Daram felt its meaning bloom inside his chest like warmth. "You are remembering." He blinked, and the figure was gone, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the temple walls. But he knew that what he had seen was no trick of exhaustion. The presence had been real as the beating of his heart. He looked back at the tablet, and in the wavering light of the lamp, he noticed that the symbols now glowed faintly. He could suddenly read them, though he had never learned the script. They spoke of the covenant between the Anunnaki and humankind, a pact made in the dawn of time. The beings of light had gifted knowledge, not as power, but as memory. They had planted a spark within the human soul, so that even when the world forgot their presence, the truth would one day rise again through dreams, through visions, through quiet souls who felt the echo of stars in their hearts. Daram understood then that his work was not just preservation, it was awakening. Every symbol, every word, carried the resonance of that first creation, the vibration of divine intention. He began to chant softly as he wrote, repeating the words he read aloud, the sound filling the stone chamber with a deep, rhythmic tone. The very walls seemed to respond, glowing faintly with each breath. The air grew warmer, vibrating with energy. It was as though the temple itself remembered. When dawn came, the glow faded and the chamber returned to stillness. But the tablet before him was transformed. It no longer felt like clay, but something harder, translucent, humming with quiet life. Daram wrapped it carefully in cloth and hid it within a hollow stone in the temple wall, where it would remain untouched for generations. He told no one of what he had seen. Yet over time, his chants became part of the monks' rituals, passed down as sacred hymns whose meanings were long forgotten but whose melody stirred something deep within those who sang it. And through the centuries, as languages changed and temples crumbled, the hymns survived, carried by traders, travelers, and dreamers who hummed it without knowing why. In time, archaeologists would uncover fragments of the temple, and though the tablets they found were worn and broken, the strange, resonant hymn would still be inscribed along the walls. When played aloud, its tones would cause the air to vibrate, as if the stones themselves still remembered Saram's chant. The scholars would call it coincidence. Others would call it myth. But somewhere, in that vibration, the ancient covenant still lived, the whisper of the Anunnaki echoing softly through time, reminding humankind that they were never abandoned, only waiting to awaken. Now, as you breathe gently, let the rhythm of that forgotten hymn fill your thoughts. Imagine the warm glow of ancient light tracing its way through the walls of time, reaching you even now. Feel the quiet connection between your heartbeat and the pulse of the earth, between your breath and the whisper of the stars. The memory of the Anunnaki flows still, soft as starlight, deep as sleep. Let it carry you into the calm of dreams, where all that was forgotten is remembered once more. The night stretched endlessly across the desert, calm and vast, as though time itself had paused to listen. Stars shimmered in an ocean of velvet darkness, their quiet light spilling across dunes that whispered with the movement of the wind. In that serene silence, the story of humanity's beginning was still being told, not in words, but in the deep, unseen hum that connected every living thing. Far beneath the sands, older than stone and story, something ancient stirred, a current of memory flowing through the bones of the earth. In a distant valley once swallowed by the flood, an explorer named Leyra walked carefully along the crumbled ruins of a ziggurat half buried in golden dust. She was not searching for treasure or fame, but for truth. The tablets she had uncovered in previous sites spoke of gods from the sky, of teachers who shaped humankind, of knowledge given and then forgotten. Most scholars had dismissed them as myth. But Leyra had always felt that myths were not lies. They were echoes, distorted but enduring. As she entered the ruin, her lantern flickered, revealing carvings etched along the ancient walls. She brushed away sand, tracing her fingers over symbols that seemed to shimmer faintly even beneath the grit. The pattern was familiar, repeating spirals, twin circles joined by lines of light. She felt a warmth travel up her arm as she touched them, a quiet vibration that made her breath catch. The air in the chamber grew thick, not with dust, but with a strange calm energy that seemed to hum softly, like 1,000 whispers blending into one gentle tone. She took a deep breath and stepped deeper. At the center of the room was a stone platform, worn smooth by ages of silence. Upon it rested something impossible, a translucent slab, not stone, not metal, glowing faintly from within. When she reached out to touch it, the slab came alive. Images flashed behind her eyes, vast cities of light, floating gardens suspended between earth and sky, beings of radiant form walking among men. She saw oceans calm under celestial ships, and towers that reached the clouds. It was the memory of the first world, the time when gods and humans were not separate. Leyra's heart beat faster, but not from fear. It was as if the visions were not new, but remembered. A voice, soft and steady, spoke not to her ears but her mind. "You are one of us, and we are one with you. We did not leave, you forgot." The vision shifted. She saw the Anunnaki gathered in a circle of light. Some wept, others looked toward the horizon where the great flood approached. They spoke of returning to the heavens, of letting humanity walk its own path. But one among them, tall, golden, with eyes that held both sorrow and hope, said that a spark would remain, hidden in the hearts of those who remembered through dreams. That spark, he said, would guide humankind back to harmony when the world had forgotten its origins. The light faded, and Leyra found herself kneeling on the cold floor of the chamber. The slab before her was now dark and still, yet her skin still tingled with warmth. She realized she had tears on her face, though she could not recall crying. The desert wind sighed softly through the cracks in the stone, And she knew, without doubt, that she had touched something beyond history. When she emerged into the open night, the stars seemed brighter, closer. She sat upon the sand, the silence wrapping around her like a soft blanket. The words from the vision echoed faintly in her mind. "We did not leave, you forgot." It felt less like a message and more like a gentle truth. Perhaps humanity's greatest distance from the divine was not in space, but in memory. She looked up, tracing the constellation of Orion, the same stars that the ancients had worshipped and aligned their temples to. The Anunnaki were said to have come from there, from the belt of the hunter, a gateway of cosmic passage. The same stars still shone above, patient and unchanged, as if waiting for mankind to look up again and remember. As the night deepened, Leyra began to hum softly, a tune she did not know she knew. It was the same melody Daram had once chanted in the forgotten temple thousands of years before, a hymn that had survived through the deep current of human memory. The sound carried across the dunes, blending with the desert wind, echoing faintly like a heartbeat across the land. And as she hummed, something in the air shimmered, just faintly. The sand seemed to glow, the horizon pulsing with light like the breath of the world. Far above, a streak of silver crossed the sky, silent and slow. Leyra smiled through her tears. It did not matter whether it was a comet, a ship, or a trick of light. What mattered was the feeling that rose from deep within her chest, a recognition, ancient and gentle. The Anunnaki were not gods of distance or judgment. They were part of the same creation, the same pulse that flowed through all things. Humanity's forgetting had not erased them. It had only veiled the connection that was always there. And now, in the quiet night, with the hum of the stars and the rhythm of her breath, Leyra knew the truth. The covenant was not broken. It was living, woven into the very fabric of the human soul, waiting for anyone who dared to listen in silence. As you breathe now, let your own thoughts drift into that quiet. Feel the pulse of the earth beneath you, the whisper of air moving through your lungs, the stillness between heartbeats. In that space, you are remembering too, something wordless, something vast. Let it hold you, softly, like the sands of time wrapping around the stars. Tonight, as sleep takes you, you are not alone. You are part of the story that never ends, the light that never faded, the memory of the Anunnaki still glowing in the dark. The dawn rose slowly over the ancient lands, painting the horizon in soft gold and rose. The wind was still, and the desert lay quiet as if the world itself held its breath. In that delicate silence between night and morning, it felt as though time folded in on itself, and the past reached forward to touch the present. Beneath the shifting sands, the ruins of forgotten cities slept, their secrets whispered only to the wind. Yet above them, in the hearts of those who still dreamed, the story of the Anunnaki continued to live. Far from the ruins, Leyra awoke beneath a sheltering cliff, the faint warmth of sunlight brushing her face. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The visions of the night before lingered at the edge of her memory, half dream, half truth. When she closed her eyes, she could still feel the hum of that chamber deep beneath the earth, the pulse of the slab that had spoken without sound. She remembered the words, "We did not leave, you forgot." They lingered in her like the echo of a heartbeat, calm and constant. She rose, brushing the dust from her hands, and looked across the vast plain. The desert shimmered under the early light, and for an instant she thought she saw movement, a soft shimmer, like figures made of light walking along the horizon. But when she blinked, there was only wind and distance. She smiled, not in disbelief, but in understanding. Some things were not meant to be seen with the eyes, only felt with the heart. She gathered her pack and began the long walk back to the camp. Each step felt lighter, as though the earth itself carried her forward. Every sound seemed alive, the whisper of sand, the faint cry of distant birds, the breath of the morning air. She realized then that everything she had learned about the Anunnaki was not a story of gods and men, but of connection, of how creation itself was one vast memory shared between stars, stones, and souls. As she reached the ridge overlooking the valley, she turned back for one last look. The sun had risen higher now, spilling its light across the ruins, and in that glow, the ziggurats seemed to shine faintly, like a mirror catching the first light of day. It was beautiful and haunting, a reminder of everything lost and yet somehow remembered. She knew she would return someday, not as an explorer searching for proof, but as a listener seeking the quiet truth hidden beneath the surface of time. That night, as the world turned and darkness returned, the desert glowed faintly under the stars. The constellations that had once guided kings and priests shone just as they had for millennia. Somewhere beyond them, in the boundless expanse of the heavens, perhaps the Anunnaki still watched, not as distant rulers, but as kin, patient and waiting for humankind to awaken once more to the unity of all things. Across oceans and mountains, in cities of light and forests of shadow, others began to dream. People who had never met, from different corners of the world, felt the same quiet stirring in their sleep, a song without words, a hum that rose from deep within their being. Some awoke with tears, others with a calm they could not explain. A gentle remembering was spreading, like ripples across still water. And somewhere, perhaps in that same deep chamber where Daram had once written by the light of an oil lamp, the old slab stirred again. Its surface shimmered, faint but steady, as though responding to the awakening minds of those who remembered. For the first time in thousands of years, the pattern carved upon it began to glow, softly, like a heartbeat. The covenant was alive once more. The monks who now cared for the ancient site would later write that on that night, the air had seemed different, charged with warmth. The stars above had burned brighter, and a strange peace had filled every soul who slept nearby. They would not understand it fully, but they would feel it, and that was enough. In time, stories would rise again, of visitors who came not to rule, but to remind, of teachers who never truly left. Historians would debate, skeptics would dismiss, believers would wonder. But through it all, the memory would endure. Because it was never about proof, it was about presence. About the quiet knowing that we are part of something vast, ancient, and endlessly gentle. As you breathe now, feel that same peace settle into you. The rhythm of your breath mirrors the rhythm of the stars. The pulse within your chest is the same pulse that beats within the earth. The story of the Anunnaki is not ending. It is simply resting, like you are now, in the calm between breaths. Close your eyes, and let the night cradle you. The whispers of the ancient world still move through the air, soft as the sigh of sand under moonlight. The beings who once walked beside humankind have not gone. They live in your dreams, in your memory, in the silent spaces where your soul listens to the universe. And as you drift deeper into sleep, remember this gentle truth. You were never forgotten, only waiting to remember. The stars above you are the same that once watched over the first fires of civilization. The same light that touched the temples of Sumer touches your skin tonight. You are part of the same story, the same creation, the same eternal bond. Sleep now, and let the ancient hum guide you home. Home to the memory of light, of peace, of connection. Home to the quiet truth that the Anunnaki whispered long ago. That all things, from the smallest grain of sand to the farthest star, are one. And that love, the oldest energy in existence, never fades. It only waits, softly, to be remembered. As the night winds calm and the stars twinkle softly above, we reach the end of this journey through the timeless story of the Anunnaki. Their memory lives on, not just in ancient texts or ruins, but in the quiet moments, in dreams, and in the spark within each of us. Remember, the past is never truly gone. It flows through us, connecting heaven and earth, guiding those who listen. If this story stirred your imagination or brought you a moment of wonder, make sure to like, subscribe, and join us for more tales that bridge history, mystery, and dreams. Sleep well, and let the whispers of the ancient world cradle you into a peaceful night.